That was a section from my piece The Rage of Achilles, which is a 1.5-hour piece for 5 vocalists, chorus and orchestra, with the text written by myself based upon part 1 of Homer's Iliad. This is a welcoming place for a composer. I've come to the Tiefurt Schloss, about 3 kilometers from Weimar. It was built originally in the late 16th century for the ducal estate. Thereafter, Duchess Anna Amalia lived out here for several summers, after the castle in Weimar was destroyed by fire. She wrote several pieces of music herself while she was here, as well as arranging for the performance of the prose version of Goethe's Iphigenia. Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna frequently used the building a couple of decades later too, playing the piano and overseeing the schooling of her 3 young children. Supposedly, she used to walk through the park to the nearby Kromsdorf Schloss frequently. There's a crafts market there today, and I'll go there shortly, following the footpath lined with stones marking the Maria Pavlovna Way. The site is easily accessible from Weimar. It took less than 15 minutes for me to cycle here along the Ilm River. And the park is as delightful place as any other to consider the further development of ideas pertaining to the mind-body problem. In the same way that Achilles and the Greek fleet, having sailed to Troy by way of the sacrifice of Iphigenia, were hammering at the walls of Troy, by the end of the 19th century, the popularity of naturalism was challenging other metaphysical paradigms, including that of the Weimar identity thesis. Naturalism implied the human mind was a physical mechanism, and the human soul nothing but an illusory mirage. It dismissed idealism as nonsensical supernaturalism, and refuted dualism on the grounds that if nature was a closed system, and if the mind was not a part of that system as dualists proposed, then there was no way it could affect the physical realm. Epiphenomenalism takes the view that physical events cause mental events, but not vice versa. In other words, neural activity in the brain resultant from the sense organs or the nervous system causes impressions in the mind, but the mind has no causal impact upon the physical body. After all, if mental events are not physical events themselves, how can they have efficacy over the physical? A person may think they're deciding to do something, such as stand up or sit down, but the role of the mind in such events is illusion. This view was not a new one. It originated with Descartes' property dualism and the postulation of 2 autonomous substances in the world, the physical and the mental. Although he didn't state it explicitly, his work implied that the physical could initiate a causal impact upon the mental, but that the mental, which had no physical basis, could not do the same to the physical. I have another example to illustrate things. Imagine the traffic congestion behind a traffic light causing a stop and start effect on cars moving forward. The lights turn green and the cars at the front of the line move forward, but then the lights turn red and the traffic stops. This causes a kinematic wave effect of stopping and starting among the waiting traffic. This congestion shock wave is not a physical object. It's not a mechanical wave transferring energy. It's a description of traffic behaviour and not a part of the behaviour itself. It emerges out of the state of affairs caused by the traffic lights and the associated behaviour of drivers. It's not a physical object in itself, so it doesn't affect anything else. Sometimes erratic driver behaviour responding to the wave might affect the shape and advection of the wave, but the wave itself has no effect on the traffic light or the traffic behaviour. Epiphenomenalism says the workings of the brain cause mental effects in the same way the traffic lights and drivers' behaviour cause the wave, but that the mental effect cannot affect the brain. The mental supervenes upon the physical, but it's one-way traffic. The mind is derived from the brain and not the other way around. Epiphenomenalism says our body actions are not caused by the mind, but by automatic mechanisms in the brain and nervous system responses. Mental impressions parallel actions in the world because these impressions are caused by the same events that carry out the action. The problem became pronounced at the end of the 19th century when naturalism refuted the dualist 2 substances description of the universe. Everything is of a single universe. There are not 2 universes operating alongside one another. Naturalism does allow for the mental and the physical to be different natural states with their respective properties. However, this points to the same irresolvable difficulty as that posited by Descartes. How do these different states interact? One view of this interaction describes the mental world as arising or emerging out of the physical world. The mind emerges out of the physical processes of neurobiology. A trumpet plays and I create a mental image in my mind by way of intentional thought of the trumpet sound or the trumpet music by way of the activity of my brain, which has received biochemical signals by way of the nervous system from my ears. However, this view seems to point only to a one-way interaction. The principle of emergence describes how the mental might emerge out of the physical, but not how causality might work the other way around. How does the intentional thought of the trumpet enable me to tap my foot in rhythm to the music? The point is, the theory of emergent mind suffers from the same problem of epiphenomenalism. The mind is not considered a part of the self-contained physical world, and accordingly it cannot affect the physical brain. The impression that people affect their environment through acting on their thoughts is illusion. All states of mind are epiphenomena and do not affect the physical world. As I've said, it's a one-way interaction. If this argument is taken to its logical conclusion, then the body, and the brain causing those thoughts in the first place, is a mere machine that operates automatically by way of reflexes to internal and environmental stimuli, without reliance on conscious thoughts at all. If I hit my knee just below the patella, the knee responds mechanically. It's a reflex of proprioception, which is associated with posture and balance. According to Epiphenomenalism, so it is with all elements of the body, at least in an analogous sense. The mind is a byproduct of the body's systems without any autonomous existence or causal capability. It's merely show. It's like the steam coming out the top of a kettle. It's the product of the kettle, but it has no bearing upon the function of the device. William Robinson explained matters better than I can. The central motivation for epiphenomenalism lies in the premise that anything that can causally contribute to a physical event must itself be a physical event. If a mental event is something other than a physical event, then for it to make any causal contribution of its own in the physical world would require a violation of physical law. Many figures considered this to be proof of physicalism, and, despite intuitive impressions, justification of viewing the mind as a component part of the universe machine. But others felt vindicated in their commitment to dualism. It was reasonable to believe that mind had no efficacy. One of the leading exponents of epiphenomenalism in the late 19th century was a contemporary of Haeckel, Wilhelm Wundt. He was one of the first experimental psychologists and established the first laboratory exclusively devoted to psychological states at the University of Leipzig in 1879. His work focused on the level 3 areas of mind pertaining to mental function, including thoughts, images and feelings, those functions that are equally important to cognitive psychology today. According to Robinson, epiphenomenalism can be derived from the fact, noted by Wilhelm Wundt, that each simple sensation is joined to a very complicated combination of peripheral and central nerve processes, together with the fact that the causes of behaviour are likewise complex neural events. This latter fact makes it natural to look for complex events through the causal chain leading to behaviour, and these can be found in the neural events that are required for the occurrence of simple sensations. The sensations themselves could not contribute to behaviour without first having neural effects that are more complex than themselves. There are a number of objections to epiphenomenalism, not least the fact that the whole notion seems absurd. Common sense tells us that our thoughts and feelings affect the things we do, and if we're wrong about this, then we're wrong about a great many things in the world, including our place as autonomous individuals exerting free will. Secondly, expressed as a tenet of naturalism, the notion contradicts itself. Naturalism as it exists today explains the development of consciousness as an evolutionary process. But if consciousness doesn't affect anything, if it doesn't have any causal impact upon an individual's behaviour, then it can't be subject to natural selection. And thirdly, the notion points to solipsism. We believe that other people possess minds by way of inferring mental events from their behaviour. However, if such a connection was denied, then we would be unable to justify to ourselves that other people, even our family and friends around us, have mental lives. This is an argument that was very common around the turn of the century, including among phenomenologists. It seems as if by today the debate should have moved on. If 100 years ago theory was based only on speculation, now there are MRA scans and other technologies that enable researchers to watch the plasticity of the brain and the response and development of discrete neural networks in response to experiential stimulation. All of which, as Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna might have been interested to hear, has an impact upon the issue of schooling. If society wants to further a science of teaching and learning based upon empirical research in the same way, rather than exclusively upon teachers' anecdotal experiences, invaluable as they are, it must incorporate the most recent findings pertaining to cognitive science. However, such an objective faces obstacles. Ansari and Koch argued that, although there is a growing body of peer-reviewed literature and websites that provides clear and accurate summaries of progress in the cognitive neuroscience of learning, there are at the same time questionable media reports and numerous other claims about brain-based learning that, in our opinion, often oversimplify, misrepresent and allow for neuromyths to flourish. Nevertheless, despite the misrepresentations that abound, schools cannot ignore the mounting evidence of cognitive research given that, as Posner and Rothbard stated, it's now possible to examine aspects of developing neural networks underlying many school subjects. These networks are shaped by genes, but can also be influenced by specific experiences such as educational interventions. Although it's clear that we do not know all that's needed to design optimal environments for every child, we believe that the ability to study networks of brain activation provides a unique opportunity to turn experimental findings into curricular improvement. It's not the purpose of this inquiry to conduct a survey of educational literature as regards strategies for incorporating research findings into curricular models. Every school tries to do this to a certain extent by evaluating and responding to any data or reports available pertaining to curricular efficacy. However, I do want to consider the theoretical foundations for such strategies as they pertain to my inquiry, and in particular to its focus on the mind-body problem. If late 19th century empiricism and early 20th century logical positivism looked to naturalism for its grounding, which in turn implied an epiphenomenal relation between mind and matter, between mental states and natural states, then I want to investigate what modern neuroscience looks to for its grounding, and what the implications are for theories pertaining to the causal interaction between mind and nature. If the Weimar identity thesis described the mind-nature relationship in terms of analogy and equivalence, and early naturalism described the relationship in terms of mechanistic process, then what are the theories today that describe the entity of mind and consciousness and self-reflective states and cognitive processes? I've reached the second half of my inquiry, and I intend to turn increasingly to 20th and 21st century ideas pertaining to the themes I've introduced. In particular, I want to look at what the tradition of thinking about mind that was tackled by Weimar thinkers has become today. The work of modern cognitive science, and neuroscience in particular, makes many ontological and epistemic assumptions. It's not only metaphysical realism that's taken for granted. If I posit a causal sequence whereby the mind is activated, this affects the growth and development of the brain, which in turn augments the cognition aspects of the mind, I'm describing mind development that is a function of brain growth and development, which, as I intend to demonstrate, undermines the entire foundations of naturalism. But that's enough for now. I'll finish with another section from my piece, The Rage of Achilles. Thanks for listening.